What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Tonight, we're taking a look at questioning Christianity. They don't really ask good questions, but we are going to be taking a look at their video about why we should even bother with God. And apparently, Christianity, it's better to believe in the Christian God than to not believe in God, is how he views it. And so we're going to take a look at how he comes to this conclusion. If you'd want to fuck around and find out why you should probably believe in God or not, then please stay tuned. So this right here is Dan, the guy on the screen right now. His name's Dan. He runs the Questioning Christianity channel, and it seems like he's very genuinely just trying to help people out. But at the same time, he's presenting some really bad arguments. You'll notice these are really bad arguments because they really depend on a whole lot of shit that he doesn't have evidence for. And it's kind of like, well, if we pick this particular route and we keep going down this particular route and, we follow this route, then you should believe in God. But it seems to all depend on fundamental assumptions at the very start. So we're going to be getting into that tonight. Let's get to this this thing. Thank you so much, Dan, for putting out this video, I guess, for us to review. I'm ready to figure out why I should definitely be a Christian. I hope you guys are ready to become Christians, huh? Yeah, y'all gonna be convinced? Go whoop whoop in the chat if you're ready to be convinced of Christianity. Whoop whoop whoop.
I was once what you might call an apatheist. You see, whereas atheists are often committed to denying God's existence, and Christians expend all their energies defending him, apatheists are relatively happy to keep the God question at arm's length. And as a youngster, I simply didn't understand the relevance of the Christian story, especially that my life seemed to be going fine without God.
To start off with here, I do have to say that I find myself in the camp of not really giving a fuck about God. Like in my daily life and everything like that, I really don't give a fuck about God. What I'm doing here on this channel is not really caring about God. Like, I don't care about God. What I care about are how people try to use God for their own malicious reasons, or their own malicious goals, rather. I care about how people are trying to manipulate others into believing in their God. So I don't really care about his God. I don't ultimately care about whether or not he believes in God, to be quite honest, but he's put out this video in an attempt to convince some people to believe in Jesus.
I guess no one had ever given me any serious reason why I should bother with God. That I did not know any serious reasons at the time, though, doesn't mean that there are none. And having become a Christian, I am now aware of a bunch of good reasons to rethink my former apatheism. So if that is where you are right now, here's a few things I hope might encourage you to take a fresh look at God and the Christian story. First, contra the popular belief that Christianity is some primitive myth for the intellectually bankrupt, I found that God and the Christian story make surprising sense, not only offering substantial answers to life's deepest questions, but also animating some of the richest dimensions of our human experience.
So I feel like there's an implied assumption here in that Christianity provides these things, and this apatheism that he's talking about, or atheism, or just not giving a fuck about God, doesn't. He's setting it up as a false dichotomy already by claiming that Christianity provides something that you just don't get from this other view, right? When in actuality, not giving a shit about God can actually provide, or at least not provide, but it can make way to have those exact same things that he's talking about here. He's got the assumption that only Christianity can provide those things, or maybe he's making an argument for Christianity, so he's kind of portraying it that way, but I guess you could just say religion or religious belief provides those things. But that would still be a false dichotomy because it totally ignores the fact that people are perfectly fine without God.
You see, without stifling any form of scientific inquiry, the Christian story provides the foundational explanation that behind the material universe lies an eternal mind.
That's an assumption that's made without evidence, like it's a claim. There's no evidence that there's an eternal mind behind the universe. And it's also somewhat circular because you have to assume that Christianity is true in order to get evidence that there is an eternal mind that proves Christianity true. So you have to assume Christianity is true in order to get the evidence that Christianity is true. He's already setting this up in a really bad way by using a circular reasoning fallacy and a false dichotomy. He's also presenting a straw man as if to say that any alternative view or the alternative view of not caring about God can't provide these answers, or you can't find these answers without God. When in actuality, we can explain the universe as far as we can, like not completely. I'm not saying it has a complete picture, but we can understand the universe without God. We don't need a God. Like, he's making the assumption that we need a God.
And that human beings are purposefully made in this God's image.
Bullshit. Provide evidence for that claim. The claim being that we are made in God's image. If we are made in God's image, why in the fuck was the first thing that he did convince somebody to cut off the tip of their dick? Like, if we're made in God's image, is God not circumcised? Or was that a pact that he and Moses made, and Moses just automatically assumed consent from everybody in history? And also, just think about it. Like, what was that like for God to convince him to cut off the tip of his dick? I mean, do you think that he fought back even a little bit? Like, if that were to have actually happened in history, I would hope that he would fight back. Like, can't we just pinky swear or something? I'll spit in my hand and I'll shake your dick. I mean, I don't care. Like, I feel like there would have been some like counter offers here. Like, I get it, cut off the tip of my dick. But what if we don't do that and we just sort of shake on it instead? Or maybe we could sign a contract. I'll even sign it in blood, not my dick blood though. God's like, I really want to see some foreskin.
Now, parsing out these two doctrines make good sense of the deep features of our human experience. From consciousness and rationality and meaning and purpose to good and evil, desire and beauty, even love.
Right. And all of those things can also be explained without God. You don't need God in order to explain those things. I get it that Christianity can explain those things, but the assumption is that you need Christianity to explain those things. You can totally explain all those things without a God. But his assumption, his false dichotomy is that only Christianity can provide this, whereas secularism or a secular individual can't. Anita Dick says, got a tip for the whole circumcision thing. Read Galatians 5:12.
By comparison, though, these features are enormously difficult to account for on a purely secular register, at least without being significantly diminished or explained away as illusory, effectively annexing some of the richest parts of our humanity. In fact, the surprising explanatory power of God in the Christian story, that's what prompted C.S. Lewis, having converted from atheism to Christianity, to pen some of the most insightful words in his corpus. I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else.
So basically, he's saying, he's continuing on with this assumption that Christianity is the only thing that provides answers to all of this. And he's making this argument to suggest that this is why you need Christianity. And he's quoting C.S. Lewis in order to say, gesture broadly at everything. How can you not believe in God? God is fucking everywhere. So it's basically a look at the trees argument. I feel like no amount of look at the trees, how can you not believe in a God, is not going to be convincing to anybody. Saying look at all this shit, it had to have come from someone, and that someone must be God, specifically the Christian God, is begging the question. Like I said, he's continuing the straw man about secularism and not believing in a God, because it's like, oh, well, how do you explain all of this shit without God? And it's like, well, we do it with fucking science that's meant to like describe reality. We can understand all this shit without God. Basically, C.S. Lewis was gesturing broadly at everything. Look at the trees. And he thinks that this is a very good argument. I feel like it's not.
See, in effect, Lewis argued that beyond the direct evidence for the truth of Christianity's claims, you should take the Christian story seriously because it sheds light on the whole landscape of reality and lets you navigate through life with perspective.
As long as that perspective is right up the taint of God, like, I feel like it's definitely a limiting perspective, and the only perspective you get is of God's taint. Like, that's the only thing that you get to see in that perspective. It doesn't open up everything to you. Like, if anything, it shuts you off from a lot of different things in this world, as denoted by the history of Christianity and their persecution of people that, are just trying to do fucking science and figure shit out without the need of a God and without concern for a God. Does it really open up everything to you? I mean, the things that he's mentioned so far, sure, Christianity can provide you with an answer, but they're all God-centered. Like I said, it's directly up the taint of God.
So if you care about answering life's deepest questions, and if you want to know how to navigate reality well, then God is worth it.
No, God is not worth it, because in Christianity, the paramount thing is God. Believing in God and worshiping God and doing things that God wants. Not things that you want or that would better humanity. If you redefine what better humanity means, I guess it could be something that betters humanity. But that's not what it generally means. To better humanity, you have to do things regardless of whether or not a God exists, and you're just focusing on the well-being of humans and other conscious creatures, I would say. I feel like him saying, oh, well, Christianity is just the better way to go, which I feel like is essentially what he's saying here. That's to say that the most important thing that should be in your life is God. And anything that you do, you should first run a check to see if it's okay with God. I feel like if you do that, you'll be in a lot of fucking trouble.
The second, if the Christian story is true, then we all have a terminal condition, one from which only Jesus can save us.
And, that's so fucked up. Like, I don't understand that kind of logic. Like, we all have a terminal condition. Oh, fuck, we do? Oh, only Jesus can save you. What the fuck? What do you mean only Jesus can save me? I mean, I don't understand how Jesus' sacrifice saves me from anything. I mean, I understand it under the Christian idea that we're all born sinful and that we all need a savior, and that savior is Jesus. I get the logical progression in that, but it all hinges on if Christianity's true, which I don't think that it is. I would consider myself a Gnostic atheist on this particular position, because I feel like we can know that God in the Christian religion doesn't exist. And so this seems like a total pointless rabbit hole to go down to me, because we know that God doesn't exist, at least in the way that's described in the Bible. And if it's not the way, if he does exist, and it's not the God of the Bible, then it's some different other fucking God, and we have no fucking clue as to what's going to please his taint. You saying that Jesus is the only cure for this terminal condition of sin, which is what he's getting at here. We all know that's what he's getting at. Christianity or Judaism is the one that fabricated sin in the first place. And then Christianity's coming back and saying, oh, well, we've got the solution for it. God copy and pasted himself on the earth and then killed himself. And then he's like, oh, okay, well, as long as you believe in that bullshit story, you can get into heaven. And it's like, what the fuck? You created a problem and then solved your own problem only so that you could sell this religion to people and get them to blindly believe in it. Why should that be convincing to anybody? I don't think that sin exists, so this entire endeavor that he's venturing down right now is fucking pointless. And anybody that's secular is not going to consider sin a convincing argument as to why you should believe in Christianity. This also has the false dichotomy idea that sin only exists in Christianity. It doesn't. It exists in all the Abrahamic faiths as well as some non-Abrahamic faiths. And they all have solutions for that sin. So it's not just Christianity. It's Christianity versus all these other religions that also provide solutions to the things that he's talking about. But also, if you're secular, you don't gotta give a fuck about it.
Now, it's not a secret that something is seriously wrong with our world. Simply scrolling through our news feeds, that's all the evidence we need to know that the train of this world is kind of off its tracks. And whereas every big story, religious or secular, tries to diagnose the fundamental problem, the Christian story, it offers a unique and penetrating observation. According to Jesus, the heart of the human problem is a problem with the human heart.
I don't really see it that way. I mean, I feel like, there are problematic people in the world and there are good people in the world. And I feel like those things are shaped by the environments, and sometimes our genetics also factor into that. It's not like the heart of the problem is the human heart. Humans in general, like how social species operate, that's the problem. Like, that has nothing to do with our heart unless you've got some cardiovascular problem. Like, if you got that, go see your doctor, get like a cardiogram or some shit. You know, as far as like the human heart, he means metaphorically, and that's just like the human condition of us being a social creature and people developing in different ways. That's the problem as far as like shitty things that happen in this world. Also, I want to point out that shit just happens. Like, shitty things just happen. It's because of our own perspective and our own subjective moral foundations that we determine which things are shitty and which things aren't. So it's all just a matter of perspective.
That having been created for good by God to love Him and love others, we have all become damaged by evil, curve inwards in selfishness. To steal a phrase from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when we look deep inside ourselves, we discover the problem, not the solution. That the dividing line of good and evil passes through every human being. And the Christian story spells out how this happened, how we fell from who we were created to be to who we now are.
And you see, that's bullshit right there too. Who we were created to be. This automatically assumes that we were created by somebody to be a specific thing. But you have to assume that first off, but he's also using that as a way to prove that Christianity is true. So that ultimately makes it a circular argument. You've got to assume God exists and assume that God created us for a specific purpose in order to prove that God exists. This shouldn't be convincing to anybody. Like, this is a shitty fucking circular argument. Like, if you had to describe this argument in a single image, it would be a fucking toilet being flushed.
And how the collective fallout of our failure is seen in very real suffering that now permeates our planet. So even though you might feel fine right now, Jesus' prognosis is that all of us have this terminal condition of sin, that all of us are destined to die, and thereafter to face judgment.
Obviously, in secularism, there's no concept of sin. We do have like moral concepts, and we can, without God, make moral determinations about bad actions and good actions and everything like that. But that's not what sin is. Sin is not your moral actions or anything like that, or doing something shitty to your fellow man. It's not following what God wants of you. Like, it's doing things that God doesn't approve of. And what's the one thing that God approves of? It's sucking his dick, and it's sucking his dick really good. And so you got to do those things in order to be good. And that's really the only thing that matters. Sure, he's got some commandments out there like don't kill people and all this other stuff, which he promptly just contradicts himself by telling the Israelites to go and kill motherfuckers. So we know that it's not like, oh, here are commandments that you need to do in order to be a good person. It's like, hey, these are things that I want you to do, but also forget about all that shit when I tell you to go and do that shit. The only thing that God cares about is whether or not you do what he says. And that is the moral foundation of Christianity. That is how you determine, as far as the implications of what this guy is saying goes, that's how you determine right from wrong, whether or not God wants it to happen. He's also still got this whole idea going that only Christianity can solve these things. Only Christianity provides solutions to these things. Only Christianity can explain these this phenomena. But that's not true. Secularism, as well as other religions out there, they can all explain this shit perfectly fine without God. Well, secularism without God, other religions with their own respective magical wizards in the sky.
Now, while we might recoil at the thought of judgment, it represents God's commitment to deal with evil and to restore justice to the world.
No, it's really not. Because God's judgment is not about good or evil. As far as, now, of course, I'm not talking monolithically about Christianity because Christianity has many different denominations, and so everybody sees this in a different way. But what we're talking about when it's concerned with his particular brand of Christianity, this evangelical type of Christianity, evil is not being punished. Or if you want to redefine evil, is not following God, because that's what it means. And it doesn't, like, he thinks that God would be against sexual slavery, and he would think that God is against raping women. He would think that God is against chattel slavery, but God literally isn't, because God commands those things in his Bible. So what is it really that makes it evil? And that's not following God and stroking his taint.
And even as we might feel exposed by the thought of this judgment, it's actually in this context of being seen, warts and all, that we discover just how much we are loved by God. For we were still apathetic towards God, perhaps even hostile. God demonstrated the depth of his love for us by doing something to save us from our sin and the judgment we deserve.
By killing his son? How does that make sense? If you think about it, like, does this work in any other scenario other than God copying and pasting himself on the earth and killing his copy, his clone? Does this logic work at all in any other area of reality? If I walk outside and I shoot my neighbor, does that mean that my water bill has been cleared? Like, if I go outside and I light my lawn on fire, does that solve any kind of problems? If I do anything of that sort, does anything happen other than I have killed somebody or I have destroyed something? Like, it doesn't absolve anything or anything like that, which, I mean, of course they would say, well, you're not God. I'm like, okay, sure, I'm not God. But I would also say that that's a positive thing because, yeah, if I were God, I know that I have full control over the entire universe. I made this motherfucker. I can do anything in it. I literally created a Sarlacc pit in the middle of the desert just to swallow up a whole bunch of my own chosen people because they were being dicks and they weren't following me. Yeah, and I'm a little bitch. I know that I can do anything, and it doesn't take me killing somebody in order to get me to just hand wave away sin. I've never understood the concept of killing another person in order to change God's opinion about sin. Because prior to this, like, God required you to, like, kill small animals, burn their entrails to, like, ash, just so that he could smell it. It's like he's working at a fucking Jimmy John's and he's like, I just want the smells.
It's nice.
I have free smells. I just want the smells. I don't understand how this death absolves anything about sin. Like, I know that it's about sacrifice and all this other stuff, but I mean, that still has no bearing on reality. Like, it doesn't absolve the person that killed their mother or their brother or their sister or any random person out there. Like, because Jesus died on the cross, that means that you're okay for killing your mother? Like, how does that make sense? Like, in God's eyes, you've repented, so you're fine. What the fuck? Like, is that justice? In this hypothetical situation, is this justice? Like, if you go before the court and you're being charged with murder, but the judge is like, oh, but this guy right here says he'll take your place, so you're fine, you're free to go. Like, is that how our legal system works? Like, I don't think so. And I feel like our legal system is far better situated than God's system. Our system is shitty, but God's system is shittier.
God suffered. At the cross, Jesus offered his life as atonement for our sins, condemning evil while securing forgiveness to all who believe. And through his resurrection from the dead, Jesus secured the cure for our terminal condition, offering a resurrection unto eternal life to all who believe.
How does that solve anything? I mean, he came back to life. He claims that we're going to be brought back to life later, as long as we blindly believe in him. It all rests on whether or not the Christian God exists. And we already know that the Christian God, as dictated by the Bible, does not exist, because as dictated by Christianity, this God has to be all loving. God has commanded the taking of chattel slaves, sexual slaves, and the senseless genocide of entire people groups. There's no way he's omnibenevolent. Okay, there's just no way. I mean, that's just one particular argument against the God of the Bible. Knocking that one thing down means that the God described in the Bible just simply doesn't exist. And at least in my view, like, I'm not saying this is any kind of philosopher or any kind of fucking shit like that. Like, just in my very simpleton engineer view, I can't say that God works if he's broken in that kind of fashion. Like, that fails. It fails the quality control check for fucking sure.
Nothing could be more relevant. Eternity quite literally hangs in the balance. Third, and simply put, God is far better than anyone and anything else that we have.
The fuck you say? As I said before, God has literally commanded the taking of chattel slaves. Like, this abhorrent thing that we all recognize as abhorrent, he's commanded that. And here's one thing that I can definitely say, is that God has commanded a genocide of an entire people group except for the young virgin girls, and commanded that those young virgin girls be taken into sexual slavery. That's Numbers 31. God is specifically commanded, and not only in Numbers 31, but also passages like Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 20 something, like 2018 or something like that, and 1 Samuel 15, 3 through 4, that you have to kill everything in these towns, which includes babies, which includes small children, which includes any woman that has known a man's dick, like all of them get put to death. God has commanded this, but God is supposed to be all loving. Also, would this kind of bloodthirsty dictator really be worthy of worship? Like, can you really say that somebody that would command you to go over to the next town over from you and kidnap all of the small girls that are virgins, that have either yet to enter puberty or have entered puberty but has not had sex yet, take all of them and force them into marriages? Can you say that anybody that would command that is far better than anybody that exists now? Putting it into that kind of perspective, putting it into that kind of context, like, I feel like no rational person would be like, oh yeah, I totally follow that fuck. The only people that would say, yeah, sure, I'd follow that, are people that are a bit fucked up, like either in their philosophy, in their methodology for life, in their morality. They're fucked up in some kind of way. It's so fucking ridiculous to me that there are people out there that are like, oh yeah, God's better than everybody. The fuck are you? Have you read the Bible? But I don't think you've read the Bible. Maybe you should go back and read the Bible.
I mean, think about it. You and I were designed for a relationship with God.
Again, that's a claim without evidence. He's just asserting it, which makes it ad hoc and makes it amongst the competing hypotheses being secularism, other religions, and Christianity. This would take it down a peg on the likelihood of it being correct by adding ad hoc claims to it that you're not supporting with actual evidence. You're actually doing harm to your own hypothesis.
Such that the contours of our human nature are never satisfied without knowing Him.
The contours of our human nature can be explained, and there's like a whole fucking field in order to explain it, like psychology, anthropology. Like, there's several different fields of science that are geared towards describing the contours of the human experience. So don't sit there and fucking tell me that Christianity is the only one with the fucking answer when your particular religion tells Israelites to go and murder small children. The contours of human fucking existence. Give me a goddamn break.
But that may not stop us from trying. And as something of a cautionary tale to this effect, an entire book of the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes, it tells the story of a king-like figure who, like many people in our world, tries to fill that God-shaped hole with someone or something else. He recounts his extensive romantic and sexual exploits, women, the vast projects that he undertook, work, the riches that he accumulated, wealth, and the pragmatic insight he acquired, wisdom. And in the end, his conclusion was that none of it ultimately satisfies. In the end, living for this moment is an empty philosophy. For if this catalogue of experiences is all that there is before time and tragedy takes us, and that the sands of time will even wash away the memory of our existence, then anything we do is a chasing after the wind.
So basically, he's putting up, I feel, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting what he's saying here. I don't think that I am. But he's basically saying that it's either Christianity or nihilism, and like vacuous nihilism, like the nihilism that would inform you that like nothing matters. It's like this very, kind of nihilism that wonders why we even, why it exists in the first place. But so that's a false dichotomy, because that's not what it's like. He's automatically assuming that there's nothing to enjoy in this life without God. That's what he's saying. And I feel like that's just a dumb as fuck thing to say. And it's really uninformed, because outside of God, like after I left religion, I found so much more value in this life. Him saying, oh, you can't feel anything, you can't fill this void in you, this spiritual void with anything but God, specifically his God. But I feel like if you're in the position where you don't feel like you're filling yourself with meaningful stuff and that God seems like a happy alternative to fill it up. I feel like that speaks to probably a deeper issue that you may need to seek professional help for. And I'm not trying to be derogatory about that. I think that there are plenty of people that are going through that. Like they just don't feel fulfilled in life. But I feel like that speaks to a deeper issue that can be resolved through counseling or therapy or a psychiatrist. I've been to a therapist and a psychiatrist to help with my issues, and they were incredibly helpful. They helped me develop the tools so that I can live a fulfilled life and I can feel better about myself. Him suggesting that God is the only solution just totally shits on all of the fields that are hoping to explain this contour of the human experience, but also that provides solutions for those particular issues. Instead, he would rather you take the newspaper and cover it and put the newspaper on top of the proverbial vomit so that you can just mask it with God. And that's what he wants you to do. That's not solving the issue. That's not solving the problem. That's covering it up so that you can deal with it later. But this insinuation that, anything in this life just doesn't matter unless we believe in God and we get an eternity afterwards, I feel like that highlights how not valuable this life seems to be on the Christian worldview, because this life right here is just a stage until we get to the afterlife. And it seems like whenever we get into these topics, these Christians are always just waiting to get to the death part. Like they're just sort of buying time in order to get to the afterlife. And I see it differently than that, because I don't want to bide my time until death. I want to live my life to its fullest and do everything that I want to in this life, enjoy myself before I die. Like I don't want to put all that stuff off until I die, because even on the Christian faith, after you die, it's not like you get to go to some magical place where you get to do all the things that you missed doing in this life. That's not it. You get to go and you get to praise Jesus's taint for eternity. That's what you get to do. And that just doesn't seem appealing to me.
Everything is meaningless. Nothing ultimately satisfies. And as we continue to get older, we realize hedonism has diminishing returns.
He said hedonism as if like just enjoying yourself responsibly is somehow hedonistic. Is that how you would describe it? Like hedonism. Hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, sensual self-indulgence. The ethical theory that pleasure in the sense of satisfaction of desires is the highest good and proper aim of human life. I feel like there's a difference between hedonism and enjoying your life responsibly. Like I feel like hedonism is enjoying your life and taking pleasure in life, but unregulated. Like I feel like that's the insinuation there. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I have a totally different concept of hedonism, but it seems like the difference between the what I'm talking about and this hedonistic lifestyle that a lot of Christians want to portray it as is like unrestricted. Like unregulated, like that's obviously not what I'm advocating for here. I'm advocating for a responsible enjoyment of your life to where it doesn't negatively affect those around you or negatively affect people in your life. Like I don't see how that is the same as hedonism. And I feel like the key aspect that differentiates them is whether or not you're restricted in some kind of sense. Because I feel like hedonism wouldn't care about the effect that it has, that your actions have on other people. You just want to have fun. And like there are things that I do that restricts my life because I care about how my actions affect other people. Well, in this aspect, it would be like you and Xander and okay. Casey was like, fuck other people.
You can become weary with pleasure, such that even it loses its thrill. Which is why the Christian story has something to offer that is worth investigating. You see, to those of you who are hungry for something more, Jesus describes himself as the bread of life and as living water. Why? Because he comes to satisfy the spiritual desires that to this day have gone unfulfilled. I
feel like that's a modern interpretation of it. I feel like the original interpretation of it was just, portraying Jesus in a very Jewish light of Jesus being like that Passover bread that they had to eat, and as well as the water being that, they associate water with life and all this other stuff. So they were trying to portray Jesus as this life-giving force. And I mean, I get that, but still, this is all unsubstantiated ad hoc claims about somebody who we can't even establish solidly as a historical figure. Like this is all just, bullshit rhetoric because it's not supported by evidence. He's also still only portraying Christianity as the only one that can solve these issues for your life. You can find secular solutions for these issues that he's talking about.
Opening up for us a rich door of spiritual dimensions to life, which is what he spoke about when he referred to offering life to the full. You see, God and God alone can satisfy these deep, otherworldly hungers that are at the core of who we are. So a story that makes sense of life's deepest questions, a cure for our human condition, along with the deep purpose and peace that comes with knowing God, that's what makes it worth it to bother with God.
The thing is that it all depends on an ad hoc claim about God, but also a plethora of other ad hoc claims about Jesus and about the Christian theology. And so none of this is supported by evidence, which if it was supported by evidence, sure, I would acknowledge that his God exists and Jesus exists and does all these things. Sure. But if you're stacking everything on if this is true, it's like, okay, well, if it's true, sure. What evidence do you have that it is true? And they won't give you a solid answer for that, obviously. But what he's essentially doing here is saying, well, Christianity provides these solutions, secularism doesn't, therefore you should be Christian, which is a false dichotomy for one, because there are other religions out there. And it also presents a straw man of secularism, meaning that secularism, you can find solutions to all the issues that he's talked about in this video without a God. He's trying to portray his religion in a positive light, but at the same time, I think you should be wary of people that don't provide evidence for the claims that they make. Like, I could point you to any number of, places to find ways to solve these issues. Like, you could call the Recovering from Religion Foundation and you can talk with somebody there, a professional, about these kinds of issues that you might have that he brought up in this video. There's several other institutions out there with which you can call and talk to about these things without worrying about God. You could also book an appointment with your local therapist. I'm sure that you can find through Recovering from Religion, you can definitely find secular therapists and psychiatrists and all that. Like, they have a list of secular doctors for your area. So you can go and check them out. And so you without the need of God, you can find solutions to these issues. And I'm substantiating this by pointing out resources that you can use to accomplish that. All he is saying is, well, if my God exists, then these things, so therefore my God exists, and you should believe in him, is essentially what he's doing.
But beyond what God gives to us, the ultimate reason why you should bother with him is because God is worthy of your worship. I mean, consider the sheer size and wonder of our cosmos.
No, don't just gesture at everything and be like, can you believe all this was done without God? Holy shit, suck his taint. That's not convincing at all. But also, God is worthy of worship? No. The Christian God is definitely not worthy of fucking worship. The Christian God is a bloodthirsty, jealous, genocidal and shithead of a God. I am telling you exactly how I feel about his particular version of God, and he doesn't want to admit it, but his God is a pretty big shithead. He commands things that are just abhorrent and that nobody now would ever consider to be a good thing, but they want to convince you that it is a good thing or that it was done for good reasons at one time. Is there ever a good reason for kidnapping small girls and forcing them to get married? Is that ever a good thing? If the United States government right now was to send forces into some foreign country and take all of the young virgin girls from where in the fuck ever and then force them into marriages back here in the United States, would that be a war crime? because you know that they're going to have to kill people in order to kidnap those girls. I feel like that would be a war crime. God has legitimately committed war crimes, and Christians are out there really doing their best used car salesman rendition in order to sell that bullshit to us.
The beauty that permeates this planet. What are these but echoes of a divine architect and artist whose reality should provoke in us praise? And I simply cannot imagine hearing about how this transcendent creator has become human to suffer and die for me without that stirring some deep desires to do something in order to express profound gratitude. Worship is the right response to the God who has made himself known, both through the wonders of this creation as well as the holy love of the cross of Jesus Christ.
See how he portrays that? The holy love of the cross through Jesus Christ. What is he saying that is the holy love? The holy love is forcing your clone to die on a cross in order to change your own opinion about sin. Something that you made up and convinced an entire group of people was real. And it's literally just your own fucking opinion. That's essentially what he's calling a holy love. Holy love is senselessly murdering people to appease a God that can't do it himself and that won't change his opinion unless people die. That's fucking... That's holy love there. Is that the kind of love that you think is actual love? Is that the kind of love that you want to be a part of? Is that the kind of love that you want to express to people? I should hope not.
That's not my love language.
No, that's not your love language. God's love language is murder and death. That's what his love language is. That's a toxic fucking relationship, and I would hope that nobody would be part of that. That's going to be it for his video. All in all, was not convinced. I am not a Christian, and I will never be a Christian, especially with, you know, how the Bible exists. I would love to know what y'all think down below. Do you think that I was unfair in my characterization of God? Do you think I was unfair about Christianity? Do you think I was unfair about this guy's version of Christianity? Let me know down below in the comments. And while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of live stream. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice.